I think I met him at a conference in England. Okay. Right. And they were talking about treating cancer with vowel sound. And they would sing these various tones, and he had a sequence of photographs where they showed this cancerous cell, or cell, I guess it was, and it would start to oscillate with this tone. And the oscillation would get bigger and bigger and bigger, and finally it would just explode. With pure sound. It's like disrupting water. Same thing we were talking about earlier. Certain things, certain tones, resonant frequencies are extremely destructive. These things will add together. The amplitude of the vibrations will add together if the timing is done properly. That's what happens in that motor. You got soldiers walking across a bridge can destroy a perfectly good bridge. That's why they break step walking across bridges. It's the additive synthesis of the power causes these things to have a tremendous power can be built up. Any other questions?
I'd heard one explanation of the walls of Jericho coming down because of the harmonics from the trumpets and the shouts. Would that be?
Same thing. If they knew what the frequency of that wall was, they could bring it down, no trouble at all. Just like bringing a bridge down, or Tesla made an oscillator he slapped on the side of a building, caused an earthquake in downtown New York. Almost brought the building down, and just a little tiny little, weighed 2 or 3 pounds, I think it was. He just got it in sync with the vibration of that building, and it just built it up. It's like taking a bathtub full of water. You can push the water towards the end, and if you keep pushing it just right, that water will go right over the side, but at no time did you use that much force. You just added it to what you already did before. It's like a child on a swing. You get a real good swing like that. These new energy devices they're building nowadays are working, some of them are working on that principle. They get a potential and oscillate it back and forth, and they build up this energy. And you can build it up to incredible amounts of energy. And if you had a hole in your bathtub and you got this thing swinging back and forth, a little bit of water would shoot through that hole every time the wave struck it. Well, you do that with electrical circuits. You just oscillate it back and forth, and it crosses a bridge, and you get a spurt of energy. Or you do that real quickly, and you can't tell that it's a broken flow. You get these same phenomena to happen. It's real simple. A lot of this stuff is real simple. It's not complicated at all. I want to show you this one thing. We just touched on this, called destruction with sound, or disintegration, acoustic disintegration. Okay. If we maintain a ratio of 1 to 1 to 1 on the 3 modes of vibration, we're going to get a perfect sphere. If that's a molecule in the upper left-hand corner, it's all going to rotate perfectly in concordance and harmony. It'll be a nice sphere, and it really won't bother anybody. If we start elongating one of the orbits, we'll be introducing a discord to do that. According to what Keely was saying, if the distance exceeded 1 to 4 in ratio, it would break apart. 1 to 4 in ratio. So going back to those photographs of that cell that this guy was oscillating with his voice, it would begin to oscillate, and it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and it finally reached a point where it can't come back. It has to destroy itself, and it will come right apart. So that's the same thing. If we knew all the frequencies that were inherent in an atom, or a molecule in this case, we could take one of them, and if we had real precise timing, we could time it and add it together, just like we're doing in that motor right there. Add that little frequency together, it's going to come apart just like that. And at no time did you hit it with a big sledgehammer, or did you got a nuclear accelerator, or whatever. But that's the principle behind the disassociation of water. You begin to expand the orbit by adding to its velocity of rotation to a point where it will finally break apart. And you can do that through this. If we look at this, if we showed all the musical notes in between these harmonics, we could see how music bridges the material realm to the infinite realm of mind and so-called God energies. Casey said that over and over and over again. Music is the bridge. It's the only bridge that'll bridge gross materiality to the superfine, subtle, energetic forces. And it's the principles behind what makes music what it is, and that's what we were talking about all day today, is how vibrations add to each other, interact with each other, can become one, can become separate, in harmony or discord. And that's the nature of it. That's why I said in the beginning, the universe is musical. And it operates on a principle of sympathy, which is love. Any questions on that one? We'll look over this one another time. This is really important. This chart is so important. You see down the bottom, matter is bound up energy, and energy is liberated matter. It's 1893. It's 12 years before Einstein wrote his theory on relativity, where he said energy equals mc squared. Well, that's what that said. These guys were working on this stuff years before conventional science began to even look at it. That's the same year that the electron was admitted to exist. You know, they were working on electricity in those days. They finally began to have electricity predominant in society, and they really didn't know what electricity was. There was a theory that this thing called electron had something to do with electricity, and they were all messing around with it. And I'm pretty sure it was Rutherford who finally got the credit for establishing the electron as a particle of electricity. Another thing, here's a really interesting thing. If it's true that the faster something goes, the denser it gets, the more energy it's got, and if what Keely said was true about the ether, that it was 986,000 times denser than steel, you know, steel would be in here, or it'd be down in here someplace, because steel was carbon and iron. I'll get up here to the etheric realm. So this is almost 1,000,000 times denser than this realm down here. There's 1,000,000 times more energy here than here. That's why we got a lot more power in uranium than we have in chemicals like dynamite. So uranium is an interatomic force, or nuclear explosions are an interatomic force, versus dynamite, which is a molecular force. If it's true that that range of density exists there, then that means we are bubbles in the ether. It's exactly reverse what we think it is. So we're not denser than the subtler forces. We are more tenuous than the subtler forces. And it's a hard thing to grasp, but the more you think about it, it's the only way it can be. And Asimov once wrote a book, I think it was on water. And I've been looking for that book for years. I haven't been able to find it. And he said, if ether was this, that, and the other thing, then it would have to be 400,000 times denser than steel. And that's absurd. He said that in his book. I remember that to this day. Well, let's put the absurdity aside. Let's put our own viewpoints aside, and let's look at it in a physical sense. If this chart has any accuracy to it at all, then that is true. And if that is true, then our physical organism, this lectern, the whole planet, is a bubble in this real, very dense media we call the ether. So you say, well, how can we move around in it? Well, a bubble in water, an air bubble in water is less dense than water, and it moves around the water. Doesn't have a whole lot of integrity, like, you know, but it does have its existence. Got 1 minute. Is there a quick question? Especially on this bubble stuff, or we can move around the bubble. The theory of how that works is we go from the fine etheric levels. We got that fine etheric point about which molecules, atoms, all vibrations can concentrate, can aggregate. They centralize these forces about this infinite center. Well, some guys theorize that this happens 4 billion times a second, 4 quadrillion times a second. So we come in